All right, all right, all right. We are live at 1 p.m. on the fourth Friday of the month. It's always interesting whenever you're trying to go live on something and, like all of the mechanics and all of the things that go into that. Like actually getting the word out ahead of time that you're actually going to do it. And maybe it actually just cut me off as well. So we are live, and it is the fourth Friday of the month. And what we're doing today and the reason why we're doing it on the fourth Friday is that typically we have, and I go to this thing called C12 on the fourth Thursday of the month. And so what we wanted to do is that, man, I think that there's like these fantastic there's just really good pearls of wisdom that happen inside of the C12 curriculum. And I wanted to provide this as an opportunity for my team, right? The OZ Pros team, to be able to experience it, because I think that there's some really good pearls of wisdom in there. And then also anybody out there, right? So anybody out there who might be C12 curious, or who's interested in refining their business a little bit more, or just basically kind of doing like making sure that they are aligning their life balance, and that they're focused in on, the things that are, on really important. And so anyhow, that's what we're doing today. And I'm trying to see if and once again, I did a poor job of getting this out there to all of you guys, right? But I also did a poor job of it with my team. So it's one of the things that we're working on inside of like our KPIs is our communication score. And I don't know, man, I think I'm probably going to take a hit this next Tuesday because I did not effectively communicate this to my team, that we're going to be doing this and that we're going to have it on a regular basis. So without further ado, I'm actually going into I'm going to pull up that curriculum right now. And it's always interesting too that, like, when you go to actually do this, you can't ever find the right one that you want exactly when you want it. And it's technology, right? It works great when it works, but not so much when when it doesn't. And invariably it doesn't right when you need it to, when you're live on a YouTube type deal or whatever. So it was a great meeting yesterday. I actually got to go through my CBP. So a little bit of background real fast before I pull this up. C12 is a Christian business organization that focuses on kind of a peer group, and they call it the table. And because we meet around a table and we talk about our businesses and we get feedback and we get input from each other relative to like our businesses. The thing that separates C12 from other peer groups that are out there, like the Entrepreneurs Organization and YPO and Vistage, is that it really fully integrates kind of the aggregate things of life itself, right? So it specifically focuses on your balance as an individual and as a person, rather than just just focusing on just your work or your business, which was really important to me. So I was a member of EO, and I loved my experience with EO. It actually really helped me kind of to launch on my entrepreneurial journey of leaving law, figuring out that it was killing me being an actual attorney, like drafting documents and stuff like that. And that I was really passionate about not only doing business, but also helping other folks do business themselves. And then kind of further in that, it opened up the door for helping people save money on taxes and create generational wealth, and to try and get that, to pass those values down to folks. And I massaged that piece out after I left EO and I started getting into C12, because, faith is a huge part of my life, but I wasn't able to really kind of integrate that in the context of my interactions at EO. And certainly They did not do that ADIO, namely because they were agnostic about it, right? They were specifically, they did not want to push any kind of thing on people, which is great, right? There's a place for that. But for folks that are, interested in kind of getting the accountability and getting the aspects of C12 and pulling that into their lives, right? The C12 brings that to bear, and they bring it to bear with some really cool ways. The first of which, and so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, is this member snapshot that happens, every week that we are there. We don't have to, but we do this member snapshot, which is really kind of cool. And in that member snapshot, we are, man, I'm having some issues with my picture here, so I'm trying to fix that. We're gonna move it up, and we're moving this thing all around. Like while we're live, we are messing with some OBS. How about that? You got to love that. And that's the cool thing about OBS is it allows you to, I don't know if everybody knows what OBS is, but it's the online broadcast system. And it allows you to be able to kind of change around your pictures and like your layout on stuff and everything else. So it's actually cool. I should have been on there to see if that was actually showing like the little stuff moving as I was doing it. That would have been kind of cool to see. But let's back to C12. So this is the member snapshot, and it's your life wheel, right? And so you rate yourself, and you rate yourself kind of within these areas. And they've actually got specific criteria, right, that we go over on an annual basis that kind of hits the play of like where we are. Probably not going to get really deep into the curriculum today because I'm only going to do this for a half an hour, and I'm probably going to have to do a fair amount of explaining about what C12 is and kind of some of the things we do. And anyhow, so this life wheel, and it's cool too because they have you do it as a wheel. And so if you're at inside of your business, right? And this is more focused on your individual self. We hit into the business stuff later. But if you're going and you're rocking with respect to kind of the cash that you're generating over here in your personal finances, but you're so like, let's say that you're a 10 here, but then over here, like in your marriage, right? It's like, hey man, I've been focused on the business so much. I haven't had time for my wife and kids. And so I'm at like a 5 with my wife and I'm at a 4 with my kids. Obviously that's not going to be very round, right? And it's probably going to look more like a throwing star. And that is not the goal. We don't want to look like a throwing star. It's one of the comments that came up in our session yesterday. And instead you want to be, and you want to be as round as possible. And, kind of a great play there relative to being a well-rounded individual. And then you go down and you check this thing relative to your 5-point alignment assessment. And this is really cool because these are kind of the crucial pieces of business: revenue generation, operations management, org development. You can kind of see the breakout of what those are, whether you're behind target, on target, ahead of target, that kind of thing. And we know this to be the case, that in June and July, people don't want to talk about tax mitigation, right? They don't want to focus on taxes. They just got through their April stuff and they're on vacation. And so we know that our revenue is going to be behind in June and July. Traditionally, that's what's going to happen. And so, it's like, okay, we're going to deal with that. We're going to try as much as we can to uncover as many rocks where we can find somebody that's on a deadline or whatever. But at the end of the day, we know that we're probably going to rebound in August or September. And as was evidenced by the debate last night, Trump's talking about opportunity zones already. So hopefully that gets us some kicked out back to interest. So financial management, right? Like goals, projections, metrics, controls, reporting, that kind of thing. But this is the really cool thing about C12 is that inside of your business, you actually have a separate ministry component about what you're doing inside of like how you're actually having positive effect on the kingdom. And one of the cool things that we did is we actually had like an impact analysis, like how many people do we actually like run across? And we had to go out and kind of come up with numbers on that. And then we had to come up with, okay, what could you do to potentially expand those numbers? Like doing a LinkedIn live where you're actually talking about stuff. And I thought, hey, how better to actually expand the reach of what we're doing inside of our business as a ministry. So that's one of the huge things that they talk about as well, is that your business itself is a ministry, both to the people that work in it, to your customers, and then also to the other people that you interact with on social media and everything else. And so this is one of those things that kind of resulted as it related to that. What gets tracked and what gets measured gets done. And so inside of measuring that, we're like, okay, what else can we do in order to increase our missional footprint? So this is one of those things. We also have a donor advice fund for our employees. We have a giving fund or a caring fund that if somebody has a situation that pops up, we've got resources available to be able to help them through that crisis and try to ease the burden of it as much as possible. So then we got praise and prayer requests. So we actually spend time praying for each other and going through that, which is actually really cool. And then sync points, right? So what do I need to talk about? So this is like right from the day. It's funny is that this stuff is way too small, right? So like I always come out of C12 with like a page of things I need to sync with my team about, or that I need to do and I need to focus on. So then we go into the devotion, and this month was godliness with contentment. And this is the really cool thing. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. And so it was kind of fascinating, right? So we're talking about this, right? Of that inside of like our world, it's all about more, right? And specifically, the biblical mindset is, specifically counterintuitive to that. It's like, how much is enough, right? And right, like accomplishing things in the world, right? Is that our sole objective, or are we really trying to operate in that spiritual plane? And for me, this is always, and it's funny too, because one of the things we talked about is that sometimes even in the context of it being in the spiritual plane, right, that we can get whacked, we strive for success even inside of that. So it's like this, right? Like, and it's that delicate balance between that, having that as a KPI, and then being content in how you're operating, doing it, and being faithful to execute what the Lord has put on your heart, but leaving the ultimate success up to Him, and letting that be, the way that you get contentment. Because I can, even in the context of spiritual things, if I'm striving and I'm trying to affect a scorecard, right? Like I'm trying to get notches on my belt for how many people I've saved, or I'm trying to show how much money I've given to the kingdom, that in and of itself can be a lack of contentment. And so it's kind of an interesting and ironic deal that is, if we're trying to do it in our own strength, and we're trying to, where that is our success, and it's something that we take pride in, that's the thing that you got to be concerned about. If it's where you are ultimately trying to bring glory to God, and that you're leaving it up to Him relative to whether it works out or not, but you're faithful in executing what He's put in front of you, that I think that's where contentment comes from. So that was kind of my takeaway from it. And, that's true, right? That's true. And that's especially true. I ain't gonna lie, right? Like when you have less revenue coming in, that is a real source of discontent, right? It's like, hey man, we are not tracking towards profitability, right? In these months where the revenue's down. And it's like, okay, well, we know that it always slows down in June and July, and sometimes August, but it usually bounces back by the end of the year. Ultimately, it's the Lord. It's up to the Lord, and success is up to Him relative to what's going to happen with that. But man, it's tough to sit in that, isn't it? So that was one of the things that we kind of came away from that. Contentment is one of the most distinguishing traits of the godly person, because a godly person has his heart focused on God rather than on possessions or position or power. And so what are some of the factors that make contentment difficult for you? I just kind of talked about some of me, some of the ones for me. And we're not going to take anything earthly out of this world, right? How does remembering that help us, really kind of foster that heart of contentment? So pretty cool stuff. And this is the, kind of the devotional component of it. And not surprisingly, the devotion component usually ties in pretty well with what the business component of it is as well. So sustainable scaling and the cost of growth. So it was like, right, we specifically went into kind of how big is big enough, right? Like we want to make sure that we're growing because that's what everybody tells us that is the right thing to do. It's like grow or die. And but I think that the key inside of that is what's healthy growth, because I think that they're right that if you're not growing, that you're going to ultimately end up becoming obsolete just because of inflation. And so you got to have some level of growth in the context of your revenue and the stuff that you're doing. But the question is how much is enough and what's healthy versus what's unhealthy. And one of the things that, we kind of really jumped into is this concept of bigger always being better. And this is actually a really good video. And this is one of the things I'll highlight. And if you guys are interested in getting the curriculum or access to any of the kind of the backup stuff, I've actually asked for this, and I've gotten an approval that, I think it's okay for us to distribute this out, and we'll make these resources available, which is awesome. That's actually really, really hyper cool of the C12 guys. And it's just like kind of further indicative that they're really focused on really getting the message out as opposed to, this hoarding type deal. They're about abundance and they're walking it out relative to number one, letting me do this right now. But then number two, letting me release some of the things that are there relative to resources and that kind of thing. So if you're interested in the resources, get in touch with us via an email. I'd love to get you in touch with Derek Rogers, who's my C12 chair, or the folks here in Charlotte. Or if you're anywhere else around the world, we'd love to get you in touch with the C12 chair wherever you are. And if you don't have one, then you ought to talk to C12 about potentially starting one, because, man, this is a really powerful group, and it's powerful in how it's actually scaling profitable businesses that are having kingdom impact. And so would love to get you in touch and resourced with that type of stuff. But one of those resources is this Read It For Me, kind of things that they've provided for us. And so while I'm out rucking, like that's one of the things that I've been doing, taking my son. So inside of that family feel, right, there's specific metrics that you come up with. One of my metrics is doing some kind of one-on-one event with each one of my sons. So I'm going rucking. We're going to go on a backpacking trip with one of my sons, my oldest one, where we're going to go up into Pisgah National Forest and kind of do the Appalachian Trail. So I've been practicing for that, getting ready for it, training for it, so that way I don't die when I do it. And as I do it, I listen to stuff that's like on my headphones. One of the really cool things is Read It For Me. And so they did a summary of this book. And it was cool to hear about that summary about the small giants and the commonalities that they had inside of it, right? These 7 characteristics of how they plugged in with their community and how they distinguished themselves as being, like really powerful, right? Small giants. And so they're kind of bucking the trend of, right, like IPO and like exiting for $1 gazillion, and they're keeping the business alive, and they're growing in order to do the thing that they were passionate about doing. And I think that that's the differentiator. Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you doing it because you ultimately want to exit, right? And you want to sell it for $1 gazillion so that you don't have to work anymore? And once again, that's not bad in and of itself if that's what you've been directed to do. But that's the key, is to really think about that and to think about, okay, is this, what does the Lord have for me? Does he want me to be, growing this business just to grow it and to ultimately sell it, and then I'm going to do something with that cash? Or is he having me grow this business because it's a chance and it's an opportunity to be able to minister to my employees, to minister to my family, to utilize it as a legacy thing, and then to be able to impact and to positively impact my community? And these small giants, those were typically the things that distinguished them. And so this is kind of a cool parable that he had in here, right, relative to like 2 folks. And it's funny because one of the things that I said in here, I was like, man, I've never heard of anybody having just enough work, right, to be happy. It's either that you're right, like you're either like at abundance where you're scrambling around with your hair on fire, or it's crickets. And so if you can run your business to where you got just enough and it's like kind of clicking along like Jason, man, more power to you. And call me or reach out to me because I want to know how you do it. And so then they asked the question, which is more pleasing to God? And I think that this is a really interesting thing, right? About like, is bigger always better? Then they always do this. This is kind of a cool thing too. Is they've got a video where they actually show what they've got a video where they highlight somebody that's kind of gone through this. And this gentleman is he's Rural King Supply. It was actually a really cool video. And he talked about, right, just growth for growth's sake. And he had this number, this kind of thing that they were trying to accomplish. And it was like, we want to have 40 stores by this date. And as they went up, their ultimate like net profit margin went from like 7% to 6% to 5%. And so they're growing. So ultimately that number is staying the same, but that number is staying the same as they're growing. And they're dealing with all of this craziness associated with the growth, but that ultimate net profit number is staying the same. And I think that that's one of the things we don't think about as business owners is, okay, are we growing just to grow, or is this growth ultimately delivering bottom line results that we can either plow back into the kingdom, plow back into the business and expanding it in order to help folks and that kind of thing? And to what's the cost associated with it? Like, that's one of the things. And so I've been talking with my wife about this ourselves. To what end, right? What are we trying to accomplish? What do we want our life to look like? And that's one of the things that I really challenge my clients to do. So as we are transitioning from being just a pure opportunity zone tax mitigation firm into doing more type of kind of aggregate estate planning and like wealth, just conversations about wealth and how to do wealth well. That's one of the things that I challenge my clients to do, is to create that life plan, to get on their same page with their spouse, right? There's this thing called the newspaper exercise where you write it like somebody's interviewing you for the newspaper when you're 85 years old, and like to tell about the life well lived that you had with your spouse and like the important things that happened that indicated that it was a life well lived. And so that then becomes the basis for your life plan. And that becomes the roadmap for what you want to ultimately accomplish. And invariably, as you go through that process, it's usually not that we made X amount of dollars, right? And that we were able to save X amount of dollars for retirement. Instead, it's specific goal stuff relative to like, man, we got to take the kids over to the Great Barrier Reef and dive. We were able to fund this orphanage in Kenya. We were able to, really positively impact our church by doing this or that, right? And so that then drives your decision-making process and what you really want and what you really value. So kind of a cool thing relative to like how that then plays itself out, and played itself out in this video where they figured out real fast that that maybe that growing just for growth's sake is probably a bad idea. And it's funny is that once they did that, and once they, really kind of, dialed it back and brought it back to where they got their stuff done and they got their processes in place and they were really delivering on what their value proposition was and what their core values were, that then they were able to grow and successfully grow and grow organically in a way that was manageable and that, delivered more profit line or bottom line profit. So, not all success is a gift, particularly if it costs you what's most important. So inside of that, and that's one of the things they talked about inside of that read it for me summary. One of the other ones that they had as a resource was, endings being necessary for beginnings. I think it was like necessary endings is what it was called. And that sometimes you've got to have an ending. You got to make a choice about cutting off stuff that's decent in order to go after what's best. And we got to do that in life itself as well. And this is like a really cool one to do as well, this exercise, right? Like, why are you growing? It's funny because I probably should have pulled up, only problem is I didn't have it digitally, but I should have pulled up the ones that I circled. One of the things, if I'm really honest, right, is that I circle because it's fun to win at the game. I love to win. I hate to lose. And so, man, I want to win. I want to be like successful. I want to get deals done just because I like to do that, right? It's really cool to win. And but man, you got to really be careful about that, because if that's what you're all about and that's the reason why you're doing it, man, a lot of times you can sacrifice stuff that you don't want to sacrifice. That's really important not to. And so I think that that this was a really good exercise for me, because it dialed in, right, what's my true heart motivation on some of the stuff that I'm doing. Which is cool about C12, right? The fact that it prompted those thoughts, and it prompted me to really think about that, and to have that going for, the things that, like, as I'm thinking about and as I'm, praying about in my quiet time every morning. Well, I wish it was every morning, right? But as I'm doing that, and as I'm thinking about these things, as whether I'm walking or whether I'm planning for a quarterly planning and that kind of drill, this type of stuff is making me think along those lines to make sure that I'm focused in on what's valuable. These are stages of business, which was actually really kind of interesting, because we have different stages of folks around the table, and they're like, man, this is incredibly accurate. We're at that stage 2 right now. And it really dialed it in on some things that, were really applicable to us. So, I think that, and they ask great questions about this stuff. If you're considering growing your company, which of these 6 steps do you need to address before proceeding? This is also a really good one, right, for us to talk about as we meet within our L10. Do we all agree on whether it's time to grow, what's needed to grow, and how we want to grow, right? And to get to where we're pursuing a right-sized business as opposed than a supersized one. And that's what the kind of the backup material was about. These are the stages of business growth. This is one of the additional items they had. This is actually a really cool exercise too, and it's a really cool thing that I'm actually doing right now. To grow or not to grow. Look at these questions. My God-given purpose is this. My primary motives for growth are this. In what days do my purpose and motives align? Indications God calling me to grow this time, right? That you've got, right? That there's blessings that are coming as a result of it. Indications God's not calling me to delay growth, right? Maybe there's a contraction. I know that everybody that I've talked with, everybody at the table was having issues because right now the Fed is trying to constrict the economy, right? They're trying to retard growth, and they're doing a really good job of it. Unfortunately, I disagree with how they're doing it, but hey, anyhow. It is happening. And so is that part of kind of the analysis you need to do, right, relative to whether you should be growing or not? These are awesome questions. If you want these resources, we could do it. I'm probably going to go a little bit over the 30 minutes today, because I think that this is a really important one. And this is the one of the ones that we've been really kind of trying to dial in the context of our meritocracy-based estate planning that we are rolling out right now. And the conversations that we're having with our clients about this relative to how much is enough? Have you set a financial finish line and getting to this place, right, of where you're okay, right? We are commanded to be stewards over everything he blesses us with, everything. That's our time, talent, treasure, relationships, jobs, and yes, stuff, right? It is. And if it is all God's, then we're not asking, right, how much we are called to give. Instead, we're asking how much we should keep, right? And so this is all about, right, like things that people have done relative to like how they've tried to combat the affluenza, right? This affluence affliction. And it's amazing how the affluence piece really crushes people. It's crazy how I've seen people inside of EO. I've seen people in, clients and that kind of thing that have hit that success, thing, and they've launched, and it becomes like more stressful for them, right? That ultimately that causes, right, some of these things: anxiety and worry, false sense of security, apathy towards the needs of others, and what's funny is that it's nuts, because you would think that it would be the opposite. But the people with the most money I've seen, a lot of times that results in dissatisfaction and discontentment. So you got to be really careful about, about growing too fast and about, what your heart is around the fruits of it, right? Questions to discuss when setting spending slash lifestyle limits, right? In the context of a larger stewardship plan. What's our lifestyle limit? What does this include, right? How much do we really need to accumulate? What kind of vacations are we going to take? Are they going to be ridiculously expensive? Right? Like, what do we want our inheritance to be for folks? Are we building all this up so that we're going to have this big freaking huge pot of money that we're just going to hand off to the next generation? And what does that do to them? And usually the next generation's typically okay. But then if it goes to the third generation and they don't have some kind of guidance around it, I've seen it completely decimate them, where they step into it and they become the proverbial, trust fund kids, right? Where that's all they do is try to figure out ways to whack that trust fund and spend that money and pursue a life of leisure without actually doing anything productive. And that is the antithesis of what I think that we're called to do. And that's certainly something that I'm passionate about, as you can tell. And one of the reasons why we do the meritocracy-based estate planning that we're doing, because my will and my kids need that they know, and I'm regularly talking with them about this, that inheritance is going to be basically in order to get them, past that kind of baseline level threshold, right? To get them up out of that, like out of poverty, but certainly into the place where they've got enough money to be, able to function, but that the real money comes when they are doing something that's productive and they're putting that money to work for purpose and for impact. And so we've got specific things that they can get money for. And then there's a large amount of discretion about money getting awarded to them based upon how they're doing in the context of our family constitution and what we set out as valuable things that we define as success for our family. And that is going to drive how the money ultimately gets distributed out. And it's not just available to my kids. It's going to be available to like my nieces, my nephews, and to other people that I think that it's really important that we provide, a means for them to be able to get access to kind of a similar baseline, right? And so just something to think about, right? So that's what I'm doing. And that's what we're trying to talk with people about and to assist them in doing. But these are the heart line of it, right? It's key that you kind of have these discussions and you really nail it down where you lie and where you sit on this spectrum, right? What's important to you and what's important to you about wealth and about what you're going to do with it. And then how are you having conversations with the next generation about that? So this is the really cool thing about the C12 curriculum and about some of the stuff we covered. And I've been on this journey myself, right? So phase one is how much do I give, right? Where you're asking like, all right, inside of this, should I just give my tithe of 10%? Should I jack it up to maybe 15%? Man, maybe we should stretch and we should really kind of, get crazy with it and we give 20%. But then we keep the remaining, it's like literally like it's kind of Dave Ramsey had the quote earlier, but I think it's Dave Ramsey that talks about the 10-10-80 plan, right? You tithe 10%, you save 10%, man, the 80%, you figure out how to spend it. And, I think that that's kind of antithetical to like what scripture says, because we really should be talking about, if we really believe that, God owns it all, then we should be at this place, right? Of setting it, instead of asking how much should I give, we're asking how much should I keep? And then what do you want me to do with the rest? How do you want me to bless people with the rest? What does that look like? And then phase three, and man, I'm gonna full on acknowledge that this one is a struggle for me, right? Am I willing to give up control? And what's that look like? Right? How do I step into that? And I can tell you that I'm not there yet, right? I'm not into phase three yet, namely because I'm still kind of building it up and trying to do that. And so it's like, all right, I'm thinking about it, right? I'm thinking about, okay, what's it look like to give up control? What's it look like for me to set up a nonprofit to be able to do the things that I just talked about? How do I establish that to where I've got, a group and I've got infrastructure around that so that there's a process, and there's really good people that I know and that I trust to be able to administer that, and to be able to administer it on a bigger basis, particularly as I plan for what I'm anticipating happening, which is going to be a massive blessing that's going to be coming in, which is going to be way more than what we're going to keep. And so we're going to have an infrastructure in place to be able to successfully figure out how that gets, invested into the kingdom, how it gets invested into, okay, so how much are we going to keep aside so that we can have, like an endowment that provides for funds for mission trips, for the things that we're wanting to do, and for what that we're wanting to, roll out into the kingdom, in ideally in perpetuity. And so that this thing continues to build upon itself as, we go down this road. So all kind of things that this prompted, which is really cool, right? That came out of this, this discussion. What's holding you back from moving to the next phase? I just kind of walked through some of that stuff, right? I wrestle with the control piece, and knowing that I've got the people in place that I know that are really dialed in with what the Lord wants to do with it. And I'd be interested if any of you guys know, or anybody that knows somebody that's in phase 3 of their journey, and what you learned from them. That'd be awesome to kind of get some inputs of that. These are results of generosity, right? I mean, I think that the real thing about generosity is that generous people are typically the most content and happy. And it is, it runs its way through into, positive health results and that kind of thing. This is also something kind of cool, this buffalo culture conversation. So that's their mascot is the buffalo, because the buffalo, they are part of a herd, but they also are, they're very rugged, and they're very intentional about how they approach problems. So like when a cow like sees a storm coming, they will like run from it. When a buffalo sees a storm coming, they hunker down and they push through it in order to get to the other side, because they realize that by doing so, they're going to get through it faster. And that's kind of the buffalo culture inclination that's there. Many of us can write big checks. How do we evaluate whether our giving is adequate and pleasing to God? And so even if that's awesome, if you're writing big checks, but how could you make it that much more impactful? What we have specific strategies where we help people to do that, with donor advised funds, with alternative gifting, with tax mitigation strategies relative to charitable gifting as well, charitable remainder trusts, and other types of really cool ways that we can help people really, magnify their giving, but to do so in a tax advantage fashion. So, this is how do you define generosity? This is actually something that I'm doing with my family right now. How do you define generosity in your life? What ways have you been generous recently? Are there areas in your life which you struggle with generosity? I mean, let's be honest, we all do that. Are your giving habits consistent with your beliefs and values? How do you feel after giving? I tell you what, so, like giving is the best drug that's out there. It's amazing, right? Like when you give and you see the effects of that, it is awesome. So that's one of the huge things that I love to do as it relates to our clients, is to try to get them, even if it's a small thing, is to get them in the process of getting that, the benefits of that generosity piece. And then one of the cool things is also like a generosity journal. And then the cool thing about this as well is that they really dial in on like action plans, right? So what are you going to do about it? And that's one of the things that they highlight: do is greater than talk. So these are some of the resources that they have, that are out there, and some of the like the books that they have, the videos, and some of the other additional stuff that's there. One of the other kind of cool things is that being a C12 member, we get access to Right Now Media at Work, right? Like, and this is interesting. Expert ownership with David and Jason Benham. I worked with the Benhams and their dad. Their dad's an awesome guy, but I need to check that out. So I'm really cool that I'm doing this because I'm really glad that I'm doing this because a lot of times I don't necessarily flip to the back page relative to all of the different resources that are there. So I'm definitely going to check that out. And big shout out to the Benhams and kind of what they do. They are awesome guys. Well, that's been kind of a synopsis of the C12 curriculum for June of 2024. You guys got any questions or you want to talk about it further? I would love to do so. We're going to be doing this on the 4th Friday of every month, unless that's a holiday or whatever. And look forward to kind of an ongoing dialogue and conversation with folks about this and to really get it going. Cheers, y'all. Have a great weekend.